Solvers are an amazing tool. They've been around for over 10 years now. However, as with all tools, no matter how good they are, it's essential to use them in a way that maximizes their effectiveness. Many players attempt to copy or memorize solver output, resulting in a limited understanding of the game and minimal practical use. That's why I prepared a structured approach to studying effectively with GTO Wizard. A simplified game plan and the skill to know when and how to deviate from the default to exploit your opponents in practice. Let's go! Okay guys, let's take a quick look at the 4 steps today, the framework for an effective study session. We start off by using the solution library and aggregated reports to get a good first overview of the spot you want to study. Then we go over to studying with custom solutions to go deep into studying to build simplified strategy. Then we go over to apply node locking to model real opponent's mistakes and identify maximum exploitative adjustments. Last but not least, we drill the solution to practice what you have learned. Let's start by going over the settings for the solution library. I recommend using the general solution since the main goal of the solution library isn't to dive deep into a specific spot or to build detailed strategies. It's more about getting a broad first overview of the spot we want to study. So let's take a random spot to illustrate this. Let's take buttoning and big blind, a very common spot. And let's say we use Queen 8-5 rainbow. As we can see, there's so many different sizes that are being chosen. So it's very complex, guys, here to simplify this, basically even impossible. That's why we want to use the solution library for a different reason, which is going to be the aggregated reports. To get to them, we go to the flop and then we click on flops. Right, on reports down here, click on flops. Here we can see all the buttoning and big blind single raise pot flops ordered from the lowest to the highest. This view shows how frequently we want to bet and which sizings to prefer. As you can see, when we take a look at this for a couple of seconds, right, the larger the sizing, the darker it gets, the smaller the sizing, the brighter it gets. So as we can see here, down below, that on ace high, king high, queen high, and jack high textures with 2 Broadway cards, or with 2 high cards, we're going to use a larger sizing, right? Then on 2 low cards with a high card, we usually use a smaller sizing on. And then on the middling sizes again, we're going to use a bigger sizing again. And then on the lower textures, we're going to use a small sizing. Just a couple of seconds in, we can already see good trend and made our first heuristics. So in general, the solution library with the aggregated reports gives us a great first impression of the spot. It helps us to understand the overall tendencies, on which textures we want to bet smaller or bigger, and where we should bet more or less frequently. We can also apply filters, for example by board texture, suits, or connectiveness, to focus on specific types of flops. So let's click on reports up here on this little arrow, and then we click, for example, on high cards, and we can see by which high card we're going to bet the most. Then we click on suits, we're going to see on which textures we're going to bet the most, and what sizing, pairing that we're going to bet the most on triple paired boards and the less on non-paired boards. And this, sure, it's not the holy grail, but it definitely gives you a good first trend to build your first heuristics. We can also use the reports to compare different scenarios, such as comparing strategy difference by position. This approach is much easier to read and takes far less time than going through every single board one by one, at least when it comes to get a first good broad overview. As you can see, the reports in the solution library are an excellent tool to get a broad overview of the spot and provide a clear, structured way to compare entire solutions and building your first heuristics. So let's move to the next part where we want to dive deep into our studying with custom solutions. Let's talk about why custom solutions are such an amazing tool. The main reason is simple. You can fully, as the name says, customize them. So to get to custom solutions, we click right here on the left corner to change, and then we click on custom solutions. Now we can create a new solution if we want to go over here to the green button to new solution. Now we are in the settings. The first thing I would recommend is that you go to pre-fill to select the spot you want to study. Let's say you say, okay, I want to study button against big blind in a single race pot. Then you just click button big blind, go to single race pot. I would recommend using these settings here, right? And then you pre-filled the ranges. And all the amazing thing is that it's already pre-filled the ranges and the SPR and stack size. When it comes to bet types, I recommend choosing between automatic or dynamic one. Automatic generates the highest CV sizing out of many for each decision point, and dynamic works pretty similar, just that you can choose how many and what specific sizes you want. To find out what the single highest CV size is, you can use the automatic type. Let's now click the dynamic bet type. For the beginning, it's totally enough to choose 4 different sizes in most spots. What you can do now is you can click on specify sizes to compare down here. Now you can add sizes. So you can click right here to add sizes, as many as you want, also raise sizes and re-raise sizes. For the beginning, I recommend to use 4 different sizings as your main sizing choice. One small one, B25, one middling one around B50, one large one for B75, and then as your overall bet size, I would recommend B125. I recommend adding on the turn a larger sizing for out of position for a certain amount of turn prop spots, and then for the river, I recommend for both in position and out of position the sizing option B300, because on the river, we're often going to have spots where we're going to use one very large sizing, so this is what I would add there too. I would also recommend that you always add all in, especially on the river, because you definitely want to have jams in certain spots. So I would definitely add this as well. And that's it basically for the settings. And now you're good to go. I recommend that you save the settings you just implemented. You just go to save down below, then you name it and save it as new. And then the next time if you want to study a spot, you do not do this again. You just go to load, you click your saved settings, and voila, here we can see everything we just filled in. Okay, the next important thing is to set a clear study goal. Don't just say, today I'm studying buttoning and big blind, single race pot. That's just way too broad. You want to be specific. Say something like, today I'm studying buttoning and big blind in a single race pot on textures with, for example, 2 high cards and 1 low card. That's how you actually make progress. Because when you're more specific, you start recognizing real patterns and you learn actively in detail. So when you start studying, it's important to organize your learning by creating flop groups. The most important thing though, when you study, is that you don't try to memorize what the solver does. That's not how you get better. You want to understand why the solver does what it does. If you understand the logic behind actions, how ranges interact with each other, how board textures change things, and why certain hands are chosen as bets or checks, you will be able to apply that knowledge even when the board changes. Okay, so guys, let's go a bit into the practical stuff. Let's use an example and think about why we want to overbet on ace king 2, but not that often on ace a2. This is again a spot as we just had, buttoning and big blind single race pot. We filled in our settings. Now the solver's chosen the highest CV sizing. For this texture is B125. So we will look in that in detail by opening the ranges tab up here. Inside the solver, checking out how each range interacts and figuring out why certain lines make sense. Ask yourself questions like, why does this hand want to bet? Why does this hand check? How does the interaction of my and my opponent's range influence the strategy here? That's how you build real understanding. When we take a look at the equity graph here, we see that the button has a pretty large advantage among the strongest hands, right? From here up to here, a pretty strong advantage. Also, when we go to the filter here and we go to hands that have between 80 and 100% equity, we can see that the button has a massive advantage. So definitely makes sense that we are allowed to use very big sizing here to punish opponent for not having enough strong hands and to kind of leverage our advantage in top hands. Let's take a look at ace 8 to just changing one card, right? And now we can see the solver chooses the small sizing for the button. And let's take a look at the graph here. There's a big difference because now the advantage in top range is kind of gone, right? Because on ace king 2, the button has aces, kings, ace king, and here the button has aces, but the big blind has ace 8 as well and pocket 8 as well. So there's no clear advantage in strong hands. The second reason is though also that on ace king 2, king x doesn't really have incentive to bet, right? Because there's no protection to be gained. But on ace a2, let's check this out. When we bet, we can see, the button, the big blind is folding a lot of 2 over cards. So we deny 6 clean outs, right? So just by checking out this texture and comparing it to another one, we found our first pattern and could build an heuristic. That hands, that textures where it makes sense to bet second pairs might be a texture where we want to bet a smaller sizing on, to be able to bet right of a value. By comparing textures and using the ranges tab, we can identify patterns and build our first heuristics. The next thing you want to do is to dig deep into what our hand actually wants to do. We go deeper into value thresholds, understanding which hands qualifies as value bets and which one makes good bluffs. We want to understand why a certain hand is strong enough to value bet, how it performs against the opponent's range, and which hands we should turn into bluffs and why. The same logic applies later on turn and river. You can group those spots as well and go through the same kind of process step by step. It's also important to remember that frequency mistakes don't really matter that much, right? So don't stress yourself about exact solver frequencies. That's not the goal. What matters is more the simplifying the strategy, understanding why a hand wants to bet or check, and being able to apply that logic in real time, not perfectly repeating every solver number. From here, we are on our way to build a simplified strategy we actually understand and can use in practice. In the last part, we will dive deep into node locking and talk about why it's such a powerful tool, how it helps us understand, and how to deviate from GTO strategies against different player types. So, the node locking tool allows us to simulate specific opponents, for example, loose passive ones, overly aggressive players, and so on, and then exactly see how we should adjust to exploit their mistakes and maximize EV. Since almost every player on almost every stake makes mistakes, right? Node locking helps you to figure out how to extract the most from those mistakes in practice. Okay, so let's use an example to show you guys why node locking is such an amazing tool. It's a pretty similar spot. Button big blind single way spot on ace 8 with a flush draw. Button bets flop, big blind defense. On the jack and diamonds flush complete, it goes check, check. Now on the 6th brick river, we take a look at our strategy of the big blind. We see that the big blind is using a medium sizing for their top pairs, for their ace x, and a very large sizing for the flushes. Let's take a look to understand this a bit better. In the ranges tab, we see that the big blind has a massive advantage in strong hands because the button capped himself on the turn, checking back on the flush complete, so the big blind clearly has more flushes. So it's allowed to use very large sizing to leverage the flush advantage. What we can see now, which is interesting, is that we mainly gonna use a very large sizing for our lowest flushes, and then a small sizing, as we can see here, right, for our highest flushes, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? Because from a first perspective, it actually makes more sense to bet the best flushes for bigger sizing, right? But the thing is that our lowest flushes are strong enough to go for the very large sizing, but not really strong enough to go for small size, and then if getting raised, raise again all in. But our strongest hands, like queen and king eye flushes, really want to get all the money in, but can't because there's so much money behind, right? So the logic here is if we have two sizes, small one and big one, to put our strongest hand into the small betting size, then if villain raises in position, we can re-raise all in and maximize the EV for these hands this way. So Let's now imagine we face someone that's very passive, like the typical guy in low stakes games. Let's see what happens if the big blind bets for smaller sizing. B50, and now the button is supposed to find a lot of weird hands to raise. Let's take a look at filters, and nomad hands, low pairs, third pairs, second pairs, under pairs, and top pairs. We can see the button is supposed to find hands like queen 6, hands like second pairs with a diamond, hands like third pairs with a diamond. It's very tough to be able to find these random bluffs, like even 6-4 in hearts is super random. Usually people are not good enough to find these bluffs and raise aggressive enough. Also, when it comes to value, people are supposed to pure raise a lot of their 2 pairs. Let's take a look at sets and 2 pairs. You can see that they have to raise a lot of 2 pairs and sets. So if we face someone that's too passive, not finding enough bluffs, not finding enough thin value raises, we miss out on so much money if we go for the small size with our strongest flushes. So if the opponent is not finding enough bluff raises, not enough thin value raises, we miss out on so much money if we bet our strongest hands for the small size. So let's actually now model this. We click right here on this little mannequin, not locking, right? And we do this by going into betting small and then adjusting by taking on node lock that villain is not raising enough. Let's say instead of 13%, he is now raising just 2%, right? Now we click right here on lock all nodes, lock all hands that these hands are fixed. Now we click on apply. Now we're gonna see very big difference. We go back to our strategy. We click here, compare nodes before and after the node locking. Here's after, here's before, and we can see a clear difference now. We see that our strongest flushes, king high and queen high, compared to before, all now want to use the very large sizing and not the block anymore. It's not used. We only want to use the large sizing. It's a pretty obvious exploit, right? But I just want to show you guys that if you use this tool, you can basically model every mistake of your opponents and find exactly out how to exploit your opponents in practice. And this is such an amazing opportunity because it just helps you to understand how to adjust, also in spots that might not seem so clear, right? So that's why I recommend to use node locking tool every time you study to get a good understanding how to exploit your opponents in practice and actually deviate from theory when necessary. So after that, now we're going to move into drills, right? Because practicing what you have learned is absolutely essential. I will show you how to run an effective drill, right? And if you want to go more into drilling, there's a detailed walkthrough link below this video for a video that explains to you how to use the drills. But this should be enough for the start. So you click right here on the top left to GTO Wizard, and then you go to drilling, right? Now you can click on the new green button to create a new drill. So now you select the solutions first. You can choose between solution library and custom settings. I recommend the custom settings again for the same reason as we discussed before, because we want to use not too many sizes. We want to use one size only flop and turn to not complicate strategy too much and actually apply and learn with the settings we just used. So I recommend the custom solution. You click on new solution right here. Now you're gonna pre-fill what you want. So let's imagine you want to study button against another gun and a 3-bet pot. So you click on the gun button, 3-bet pot. Let's say you want to study 200 big blinds deep. I recommend these solutions, NL500 ranges, the general GTO, and then whatever you want, depends on what stack depth you want to choose. You click on confirm, and now you have your spot button against another gun. We definitely want to make sure that we click and put our dynamic sizes in. So we click on load right here down below. We implement our dynamic sizings we just created. And as we can see, all of them are implemented. So now in the drill, the solver is going to choose between all of these sizings. It's going to choose the highest V one for you. So we actually study and apply the drills with the settings we used in the custom solution. Now you click on create solution. So now you are here to again be very specific about the spot. Let's say we want to study button against under the gun, 3-bet pot, 200 big blinds deep on 2 high cards, 1 low card. So we go to board, we select this here. The highest cards should be between ace and 10, and then the middling low card, and then the lowest card is between 2 and 7. Now we have only boards where the highest and middling card is between 10 and ace. The lowest card is 2 to 7. You can also say, okay, I want to study the entire spot. Then you just delete this and you get all possible flops. That's why it's such an amazing tool, because you have endless possibilities to apply the things you just studied. Now we click on save, rename the drill, let's say button against under the gun, 3-red pot. We click on save and now we can find it here. It's saved. We click on this drill now and start the drill. And now we can say, okay, I only want to be in position, right? The hero is in position. UTG should be GTO, right? And now we can play as button only, as the aggressor, and start the drill. And now we have a spot created where we study only textures with 2 high cards and 1 low card. And again, you can create the drill however you like. You have endless possibilities. That's why it's such an amazing tool, because here you can actually apply and get reps in from the things you just learned. Okay, so let's recap this in short. The first step was to use the solution library and reports to understand global tendencies, sizing preferences, and betting frequencies. We want to get a good first overview of the spot we're about to study. The second step is to use the custom solutions to simplify the game you understand, not memorize. Define clear study goals, group textures, and understand why hands want to bet or check. Last step is that we want to apply node locking to model real opponents, to deviate from GTO, and maximize CV by targeting mistakes. Also, we want to get reps in by using the drill. The core principle is to not memorize solver output. Understand concepts, simplify strategies, and apply them against real opponents. Okay guys, finally I want to stress one last thing. Don't study too statically. My advice is that you are curious, that you allow yourself to go a bit off topic, learn to actually think outside of the box, and that you in general allow yourself to be curious and go slightly off topic. So that curiosity is what helps you to build a deep, intuitive understanding of poker, and that's what really separates a good player from an amazing one. Okay guys, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. It was my first video for Wizard, so if you have any feedback for me, let me know. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments and we'll get back to you. Thanks for watching, see you next time, and bye bye.